Dear Lord God, I come to you this day and come to you thankful again that we get to gather in your house this day to hear your word, to be reminded to seek your kingdom first and to treasure the things, all the blessings that you give to us in our life, to be content with what you have given us. God, we thank you for these weeks of study on this topic. And we ask that you would now help us as we come to the end of this study. We ask this in Christ's holy name. Amen. All right. So, like I said, we want to kind of finish up. And mostly today we're going to do two things. One is kind of just review some of the overall things we've talked about. If you have any lingering questions, we can do those. And then we'll focus we'll end sort of just by reading through the account of Jesus' death and burial and resurrection, and kind of just let that be the final thing in our mind as we think about these topics, since we've kind of said several times, right, ultimately our death and resurrection is Christ's death and resurrection, right? He's the one that makes that possible for us, and so we'll talk about that as we finish up. So again, kind of just the final things I wanted to just kind of run back over, right? So we started with this, but end with it, right? For this topic in our lives in general, we want to ask what is best, not just what's allowed, whatever that even means sometimes, but what best gives witness of the hope Christ has put within us through his death and resurrection. So again, just whatever topic, all these different kind of points we've talked about, whether it's what we're doing in the funeral service, what we're doing with our bodies, what we're doing leading up to death, what we're doing now to prepare for our death, we want to, again, think, well, what's the best thing I can do, rather than just sort of, what do I want to do? What does somebody else want me to do? What costs the least or maybe the most in some cases? Anybody want to really show off at their funeral? Not going to admit it here, at least, huh? No. It's certainly been done, right? But really just trying to run everything through this filter. And like I said there, right, our lives in general, right? So no matter what point in life we're at, right? We're having a baptism. Ask the same question, right? We're having a wedding. Ask the same question. Again, just even in, I'm going out to work today as one who's been baptized into Christ, right? What's the best way I can give witness to the hope that Christ has put within me? Okay? Any thoughts or questions on that regard? I guess the last thing I'd say there is this is something too that I think, this is good to encourage other people to, especially if you hear a conversation quickly going into other stuff, and a lot of times when it does, then you get contention, especially if there's more than one person involved, right? If everybody's just trying to do what they want to do, it can really lead to kind of strife in a family or whatever group is kind of gathered. And so it's another thing to try to say up front, hey, let's think of it this way also, right? So that we have a common way. Yeah, Betty?
Well, if I have written down what I want,
yeah,
shouldn't that be the end of the story?
It should be. It should be.
Shouldn't they
honor that? Well, yeah, and I mean, I would certainly encourage that strongly. But, I guess the only caveat to that is today, right? Or, well, you were here last night. Yeah, you were here last night. So, we get Solomon today talking about one of the things that's vanity in the world is that you work hard and you build something, and then you have to give it over to your kids who might mess it all up. Right? So, I mean, there is always that case. And I've definitely had a couple of those cases where, I don't know if it was that direct, but sometimes you do get, the kids want this funeral that's so different from the life that person lived, right? So again, that the person that's died was, in church every week, just, enjoyed being kind of in the traditional service, traditional Lutheran kind of thing, and then you get a kid. But usually And that's why I think the writing down is important. There is something just in general about writing it down, right, that makes people less likely to go off on their own, right? There's a record they have to look at and go and know at least that if they're trying to do that, that they're really going against what a person said. So I would say, generally speaking, when people come in, if they have something written, especially in the hand, written out this way. I mean, again, I don't write anything hardly out this way, so I can't talk, but typed out is fine too, but especially in the handwriting, right, there's something very powerful about that this is, like I said, occasionally we don't know exactly what it says or what it meant, right? That's the downside, but people usually want to honor that, yeah, so, for sure.
And I'm sure a lot of your one of your questions maybe over what did so-and-so want? What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think so-and-so would want?
Right,
If they aren't.
For sure, yeah. And even just, we're going through hymns and scriptures, again, that's a lot of kind of how, it's framed. Do you know any verses that were, important to this person? Or, were there any hymns that, they always sang out on? Or, if we don't have anything. I'm glad that question came up. I don't know if there was anyone not here last time. I'm not good at remembering stuff like that. But I did hand out last time kind of this sheet, two things, right? One that kind of gives you an idea of an obituary, kind of at least a framework of how you might write an obituary that would speak of your faith. And then the other one is this thing that is entitled the funeral service will, and that's kind of to this end, right, of writing down in advance what you want. And the last thing I didn't say, I don't think I said about this last time, if you do this and write it down, make a copy and bring it to the church too, if you're comfortable with that, and we'll put it in your file, because that's the other thing that sometimes happens is you might write this down and put it in the third drawer on the left, and at the time of the funeral, your kids might not remember that you told them third drawer on the left, right? And so every time we have, everybody has a file in there, right? We won't show it to you. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually always kind of interesting because especially Linda's done a good job of clipping things, and other people, I think, too, bring in things from the newspaper. So it always is helpful, especially if I don't, especially when I first got here and didn't know the people very well, it kind of quickly does give that. But we'll throw this in there too, and then that way when, before I meet, I always, check that file, and I can say, oh, look, here we have this. I don't know if you have it, but, right, here's this thing that kind of lays out that. So no necessary time limit on that. If you're a person that needs a deadline, do it by this Friday or else, okay? But otherwise, you can do it when you want to, I guess.
How many scripture readings should you have?
Well, typically the service is laid out, how it's laid out in the hymnal is Old Testament, Epistle, Gospel, just like we do on a Sunday morning. But again, I'm not, if people have 2 Old Testament readings that they really love, we're going to do that instead. So, but I'd say, at least 2, probably 5 or less, if you really do. And again, we joke, but part of it too is what's their length, right? If you just want one verse from somewhere, then add something else. But if you want to read, all of 1 Corinthians 13 or all of 1 Corinthians 15, then pick some other short ones to go with it probably. But
I said Psalm 119.
There you go. There you go. All right. So then the second thing, kind of just in summary here, right, that we honor the body, believing it will be raised up. So this then, right, informs what choices we make regarding our bodies at death. And we don't need to go over all that stuff again. And again, I have posted the video of these, so if you missed one and didn't get that discussion or something, you can go back on our YouTube and find all that as well. But again, it sort of flows from that first one to say, if we believe that the body will be raised up, how are we giving evidence to that, right? And I guess in the most general sense, I would say, don't be dismissive of the body, right? Don't treat it like it's nothing. And in one sense, whatever you end up doing, treat the body with care, right? So I'll leave that up to you. David's not here today, but he's going to use his walk-in cooler, I guess. So if you have catering with him the week he dies, you might want to, I don't know, ask if you can move the meat somewhere else or something like that. So, all right. This is something I wrote down way at the beginning, but I think it does kind of summarize one point about this, right? Variety is the spice of life, not death. So, so what I mean by this is, and we've talked about this, it seems that increasingly every death and funeral is different, right? I think I've mentioned this. I talked to the funeral home guys about this, again, that, you used to just kind of meet, an hour and a half later, you kind of had everything in place because it was the same as the person before and the same as the person after, other than maybe the location, right? What church are we going to? What cemetery are we going to? And is the meal at the place or are you going somewhere else, right? Again, it's not to say there can't be any variety, but I do think when we looked at what God's people did, right, it was a very simple process in a lot of ways, right? Focused on the basics. And so again, I think in a world where we can do so many things, it's good to consider, well, what if we just do something pretty simple here, right? And would that be, back to the first question, would that be better or worse at giving a good witness of what we believe? Yeah, I don't know. Any questions on that? I know it's kind of a general statement. Yeah.
What is the real purpose of bringing the body or the ashes to the church?
Well, I mean, one, I think it is just the reality of death, right? That we have the body there. And in one sense there, and again, like I'm always a little careful about this, that we have the person there. What we have of the person that we can have at that time, right, is there. And so again, is sort of be like, having an adoption ceremony for a kid and a party or something, and everybody gets there and someone's like, well, where's little Steffi? Oh, we didn't bring her, right? Like,
Okay.
kind of just odd in that regard. And then the third thing I would say is just our liturgy, again, is written with the assumption that it's going to be there. And again, it's not in big ways. I don't think, if the body's not there, I don't think people are like, well, why did they say that? But it still is true that that's written with the assumption that the body is present. And again, even some of these things, we've talked about sort of some of the practical things too, that we don't have anymore. I mean, most people still list pallbearers, but I'd put money that in 10 years, that won't even be asked, right? Because it'll be so long, and people go, pallbearer, what is that? What do they even do, right? Like, we've already got the cousins listed in the obituary, so what does this pallbearer thing mean, right? But there was something, again, even just from a community, family aspect of doing some of those things to care for the body at the end, right? Going to the cemetery, right? And you go to the cemetery, what do you do next after you, or either before or after, depending on, well, we were at the funeral out at Faber's, and we had some extra time before, not much time after. But what do you start doing when you're in a cemetery? Walking around.
Looking at that
Oh,
dirt.
who's that, right? And when you do that, right, you start to learn more about the people you're with and the people that came before. So again, some of these things, as we care for the body, there's just other things that we don't, at the moment, we don't think, well, if we don't go out to the cemetery, we're not going to have that time of looking around at tombstones and talking. You don't think that way, right? But it's true, right? And that's part of how you do learn people's stories, right?
Well, and it used to be, it was always the family, some of your family was
Yeah,
buried there.
right, exactly. Yeah, right, yeah. And again, things you think everybody knows in your family, but don't, right? You start talking, oh, I never knew that, okay, yeah.
So what would you do without pallbearers? So what would you suggest?
Well, I should be clear there. Those that are going with traditional will still have pallbearers. I'm mostly saying that we're getting so much that's cremation or just there's no body present, right? Or burials done beforehand, right? A lot of these kind of trends. So again, I mean, if you have a casket still, yes, name pallbearers. we need someone to do that work. Yeah, I probably didn't say that very clearly. So in those, I just think it's going to be less and less of a thing, unfortunately. Maybe not. After this class, it'll all turn around. It'll all turn around. But no, but it pallbearers, again, I know that can be a difficult thing sometimes, right? To figure out who you include and, okay, do we include this person who's sort of similar to these persons, but not for one reason or another? But it's even just an honor. And I think especially, if you have those young men, right, in your family to do that work. I mean, it doesn't have to be that, but I always think it's one of those times where you see those young men thinking pretty deeply, right? And young men, in general, don't think very deeply. Agreed? Sorry, Gideon. No, I'm just kidding. So it is something where it's a real, you can just see people that is a real honor, right? And it leads them to think about kind of family and death and things like that. And again, if there's nothing like that, I think, again, it kind of robs us of some good things that usually go on there. Okay? Let's see if this makes sense. At the time before, during, and after death, and here I mean, generally speaking, right before, during, and after, right? We recognize death, not denying the reality of it. So again, we've kind of said this at multiple different times and in different ways, but we don't want to act like death didn't happen, because as much as we don't like it, we need to understand that it exists from just a general standpoint, and ultimately that it is the wages of sin, right? Being paid up. So we recognize that, and again, exactly how we do that may be different, but we don't just try to hide that death has occurred. But then, of course, we also recognize Christ's victory over death. And I think on one of the slides, right, this is where we ended up with this, for stealing from the scriptures there, that we mourn with hope, right? The scriptures say the opposite, that we don't mourn as those without hope, right? But we mourn with hope. And so we do recognize that death is a bad thing, that it hurts, that it stings, that it's not what God originally intended, right? But then we rejoice that Christ has given us victory even over death, all right? Then, I guess I kind of said this before, but we make decisions not based primarily on what we want or even the exact costs involved, but what will be best to serve our families and the others left behind. I think I got too many bests there. And we sort of have talked about this, although I don't know a lot, is that I do think it's very appropriate to think about your own death as sort of your final act of love towards those you're leaving behind, right? And that would incorporate everything, again, like we said, having some things written down to make that actual time a little easier, that as they're, going through all this, sometimes a lot of shock, but always some shock, right? One of my phrases is always, death is always sudden. Right? Even when you know it's coming for 2 years and the person's been real sick and getting sick, when death occurs, no one just goes, well, I kind of thought that would happen today, right? No, it still always hits very suddenly. So again, having some things written down and things, but also our funeral service and stuff. And this is one of these things, because we talk sometimes about kind of what we want and writing down what we want, but then I guess I'd add to that, what we want should not just be selfishly what we want, right? It should be what's going to serve the people that are gathered. Now, again, a lot of times those two things are going to be the same thing, right? I want this hymn sung because I love this hymn, and also, right, it beautifully proclaims the resurrection of all people, right, and those who believe to eternal life, and I want my family to hear that, right, on that day. Some of the hymns we'll sing today in church, I was, for some reason, just kind of thinking about, they're not at all traditional funeral hymns, really, but at the same time, we'll sing, "What is the world to me?" And I thought, that wouldn't make a bad funeral hymn, right? Or even the last one we'll sing, "Christ be my leader," right? I think it's the last verse, if I'm remembering right. It definitely has a sense of death and resurrection about it. But what's going to serve them best? And again, like I said, a lot of times there's a lot of overlap to that, because again, one of the things that often too serves the people best is to do things that are important to that person that has died, right? And it's kind of back to this, they want to honor that person, right? And so even again, tragic when it happens, but if we have kids, right, who are not in the faith, or certainly not, real connected to their faith, however we want to state that, depending on the situation, again, that they're going to say, well, yeah, mom would have wanted this hymn. And then maybe, right, as that hymn goes in the ear, right, at that particular time, it enlivens faith again as the Word of God is there, right? Okay. Anything else on any of this? Or anything in general, yeah.
So with that last thing, doing what's best for the people, the families, why would you cremate? Why do the person who's dying, why do they want to cremate instead of have their body there, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before I answer that, anybody want to answer that? If you're thinking about being cremated or things like that, if you're thinking about, again, like there's lots of things that go into how you think about that, but as far as serving your family best, do you have a thought there of how that would relate?
Maybe some really bad cancer that has disfigured.
Okay, so maybe there's trying to guard people kind of from the the severity of, bad accident or,
How about closed casket?
Okay.
I mean, he's talking about.
Yeah. As another option, right? And sometimes that's done. I mean, I think a lot of times, ultimately that decision is brought about by the funeral home, right? Because they're the ones that look at the body and kind of know what's possible or not. So they may suggest that. And again, like, when I say that we want to recognize death, it doesn't also mean that we need to be really, macabre about it and like we want to show it in its worst state or something like that, right? Other thoughts with cremation, just trying to, think through this with serving the family best.
Well, I know Mark's mom always says, I don't want to be put in the ground.
Okay.
That's her reasoning.
Yeah.
I don't want to be put in the ground. Like, she's claustrophobic. And
Yeah.
it's not that different anyway.
Right.
But.
Right. Well, and I do think we do have to realize that with death stuff, certain people get certain ideas and they're just hard to shake, right? Again, like I said, you got some people that I think really do want people kind of coming by the casket and seeing how nice they look, right? They've put in a lot of thought to what they're going to wear and what, And then you've got others that, again, that idea of people wandering around their body just gets in their head as something really weird, right? And again, I don't know that those are necessarily rights or wrongs there, but we do have to, kind of realize as we're, again, trying to serve our loved ones and things like that, that some people do have these ideas that to us we would have never thought of, right? But are kind of there. So at least to deal with, what do you want to say, deference or whatever to them, just in the sense of, oh, okay, I never thought about that, or, and then, leave the room and then say, well, they're going to be dead, right? I mean, no.
How are they gonna know?
Yeah, right.
Well, I think
Yeah,
you have to also, when somebody hasn't made the decision whether to be cremated or not,
yeah,
and the family's left to do that, I think you ought to think pretty hard about it, because it'll affect you later if you have regrets about having them cremated.
right.
That happened to my dad, for instance.
Okay, yeah,
And he had decided to cremate. And afterwards, he said, I just feel real bad because I did that, because your mom liked to get all dressed up and fixed up and look nice.
yeah, right,
Destroyed her body.
yeah. Yeah, I do think, right, there is something about, yeah, I mean, we don't want to go overboard there, I mean, because you can end up being paralyzed into not doing anything if you're too worried about that. But I think you're right, and particularly about cremation, I think we've got one group of people that is just moved to the place where they don't even have any considerations about cremation being wrong or not the best or whatever, right? And then you've got a bunch of people, and it's not necessarily even by age, I don't think, right? You got different people that just have very different ideas about that, and I think you're right that we need to slow down and ask, all right, will everybody be okay with this? I don't know, what do you think? People that prefer cremation, are they offended if they go to a service where there's a body?
No.
I don't think so. What about vice versa? People that prefer traditional burial, are they offended if they go to and I don't mean offended here like I'm going to walk out of the building, but does it bother them if there is cremation?
I think it does.
Some people,
I just thought of that as we're talking, right? There are some. And I think, again, that kind of along the lines is let's at least recognize that might be the case, right? And that people might, again, some people just have this idea that, I need to see the body, right, to kind of have this closure.
I guess I'd say if there's any doubt, don't cremate.
Right. Yeah.
Because you will come back and regret it later.
Yeah.
And that's just something else you have to live with.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I don't want people coming to the cemetery after I'm dead and bawling over my grave.
Okay.
I don't want all that.
Okay.
I mean, it just,
Well, yeah, but the only thing I'll just push back just a little bit just to give an exercise of what we're doing here. But what if Laura wants to do that, and that would be helpful for her if she grieved?
she can do it all she wants. She doesn't have to have,
Okay.
besides, she's gonna have more money. No.
maybe.
She'll be on vacation?
But at the same time, if I die here,
Yeah,
I don't have much family here.
right.
I said, I don't even know how many people will be at my funeral. Not that I care.
Yeah,
But I said, when it comes to family, this is my family.
yeah,
They're gonna, and my church people are my family.
yeah,
Oh,
But
we're
I-
not gonna come to your graveside.
That's why I just, when I've said, just take me out and throw me up in the air.
Right.
Just-
Yeah.
And and then I've read about how long it takes the body to decompose, and it's gross.
Already dead.
This way it's over and done. That's me.
right. No, and like I said, I mean, I think we do have to be, again, understanding of, again, these different ideas that, again, like I said, Doug can say one thing, and I won't pick anyone out, but someone else here might go what sense does that make, right? It really is a thing where it's different there. I mean, and back to Jamie's question, I think for a while, again, people thought they were serving their family just because they weren't spending the money on a funeral or as much on a funeral, right? And so, yeah, it's nicer in their mind, right, to do this cheaper option, and then, their kids can, pay off their old car or something like that, or whatever. And I don't mean to demean that, right? In one sense, that's not a bad thought as far as how, financially am I going to be able to kind of even, help my family out. But that'd be my guess. The other thing is, again, I think there's just some people that, again, are to the point where they think a traditional service or looking at a body is really dark and morbid, and so they think, well, I'm sparing my family that. They don't have to look at my body.
That's the way that you remember the person.
Okay.
That very last time that you see them, and maybe it wasn't, they weren't looking so good. That's not the way that you want to remember them.
Right.
And so I remember when Mark's grandma passed away, they forgot to put her teeth in.
Oh, yeah.
So she didn't even look like her grandma.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So.
Renee?
Well, my stepdad, he went ahead and he had this pretty much planned out, but he went ahead and had a service with the body.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, he was cremated and we brought him back.
Okay, yeah.
Which I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, I mean, they do, people do rent caskets, right? That's a thing, right? Where you rent a casket for the service.
I think it looked real, but I'm not sure how real it really was.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, when I was looking at this stuff and just researching it, I never really got, again, I mean, there are some funeral homes, again, I don't think this is an option here, but they said there's increasingly funeral homes where if there's a cremation that the family is invited to gather at the time of the cremation, and they put them in a, depending, I mean, sometimes it is kind of a full casket that is incinerated, but a lot of times it's sort of this cardboard box, right, that the body is put in. Then it was saying that the increasing trend is that there's a button outside that somebody in the family pushes to start the conveyor belt.
Oh, that's gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know
But it said again, they were saying this is kind of like the real trendy funeral homes. And again, like some of that, I think, we think that is so weird. And I mean, we'll save that for everyone's opinion, right? But like, I think some of that is a return to like, we're doing something as a family together afterwards, right? Like, I think it's kind of a reaction to like cremation where it's almost just that kind of like the person disappears stuff, right? And kind of people eventually over time will modify a practice because they say like, well, there should be something. Like we used to gather as a family. Well, here's your chance, and little Stevie gets to push the button,
I have to wonder if they relish the.
Yeah, yeah. What's the look on their face as they do it, huh? Yeah, that could cause family strife for sure.
Family gathering afterwards. And was it your grandpa when we went out to Bob and Jan's and we
had a
all the
wake.
cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a wake after the funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't cremated,
No.
but it was just, Grandpa would have really wanted to be buried at sea.
Oh, okay.
The native
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
but
Well, we've removed death from our lives so far that it's almost like it really doesn't even happen.
Right. Right.
To be, not that many years ago, a dead body, they had to have people that sat with the body.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In your living room, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you think cremation has made that more like they're gone, let's move on?
Oh, I think, again, I don't ever want to judge like everyone's intention, but I personally, as I think about it overall as a trend, I certainly think that's part of cremation. And maybe more so now because I think, again, the financial part of it has not been totally dispelled, but I guarantee if you're getting a casket and pushing the button, you didn't save any money on that cremation, right? So I think as that kind of fades away, then you do have to ask, like, or at least as a huge concern, you do have to ask, well, what's going on there? And again, sometimes, again, it's just this some thought that gets stuck in somebody's head, but I think overall, it is kind of part of that idea of just not seeing death, putting it away from us.
Some people, I mean, I know somebody that I used to work with, when her grandma passed away, they got little, like, pendants and have, like, necklaces that have the ashes.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're, like, completely poof, they're gone. They're still remembering them and.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked a little bit about that in one way it's right, you got to tow a grandma and the other one got the arm and, so there is kind of, I mean, to me, again, a little bit of a weirdness about that, but I think you're right, it is a way of remembering and even, of course, I mean, in one way, a recognition that person's gone, so, yeah.
Now, I don't know how many people have ever been over to my house and watched me sleep.
I haven't.
No, I don't. I mean, that's what
it feels like.
Well, if people come in, they look so nice. How do you know I look so nice? Maybe I looked nicer when I was alive.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's always the thing you do hear people back and forth, right? They look so nice, and then other people go, they look dead, is what they looked, right?
Sure didn't look like that.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of regardless. I mean, sometimes you do have those things where something's just off, right? And it doesn't look like the person at all, right? Or looks very different than whatever.
I'm going to ask you a crazy question.
All right, crazy question.
Somewhere. If you're laying in a coffin,
yes.
Do you have pants on?
And shoes.
And shoes? You do have. See, I've heard that you don't.
Huh.
Just dress you like from here up.
Dress. No, they want you dressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'll ask you to bring that.
We can do that for you.
I'm being cremated.
We do not? We do not?
You do that to me.
I can say we don't have a liturgical rite for depantsing before burial. I can say that.
When I read that, that seems strange that they wouldn't.
Yeah. Again, the only thing I can say from just some of the stuff I read and stuff like that is, I mean, there are things, again, that are done that are a little weird. I mean, just as far as fitting the person in at times and stuff like that, right?
But when people go out
I mean, I'm going to have my feet are just going to hang out. They're going to drill holes on the bottom, and so I make sure they didn't like contort my legs real bad to get them in there.
Some people will go out and buy all brand new clothes for the person.
Right. Yeah.
Why didn't you buy them for me while I was alive? I mean, I know this is silly.
Yeah.
It just that's the way I feel about the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like a big circus sometimes too.
It can be for sure. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
Is there any, we're talking about pallbearers. Is there anything that says girls can't be pallbearers? I mean, I know it's traditionally guys.
Yeah.
Because they would be carrying the casket.
Yeah, I think that's why it traditionally was men, was just because it could be quite, I mean, if you go back to when that meant the most, you were carrying the body out of the church to the church cemetery, which wasn't far away, but when you're carrying, right? So I think I've never heard of any other reason that it needs to be males. I think it was mostly just, it originally was who was strong enough to do the job, right? And now, usually the funeral home will basically wheel you out to like 5 feet from the hearse, right? And then you pick up and, put in, and then again, similar distance once you get out to the cemetery. And so I don't know that that's as big of a deal.
They have honorary pallbearers.
Yeah, sure.
I think that maybe has sometimes been girls, been males.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What's the purpose of the honorary?
I don't know.
What'd you say?
To honor your friend.
Yeah.
I was an honorary pallbearer,
Oh,
and
it's just
she
honorary.
was a very, very good friend. So there were two of us.
Yeah.
Who were honorary.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and I've seen before where like it's, you have, a dozen cousins. And you're going to use 6 of the cousins to be the pallbearers, and so they almost just feel like, well, we're leaving 6 out. Are they going to be mad? So they're listed, there. Where again, it's kind of like we would have had you, but we didn't need that many hands, almost, or things like that. So.
Well, I know for myself, I had 2 people that requested me from this church.
Yeah.
Pallbearers, and it was just an honor. I
Yeah.
was shocked when they asked.
Right. Yeah.
It was an honor.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to remember that it meant something to those people.
Yeah.
And the person that died.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and I think particularly when you are asked when you didn't. And again, some of that are just the traditions, right? In some families, it's always families, and it's always, again, some it might be the kids, and other people would say, well, I'd never have my kids do that because I don't want them, breaking up as they're trying to do this or whatever. So in some families, there seems to be a tradition of who it is. But again, I think, especially when you don't sort of know that you're, you knew the person didn't seem to hate you, right? But it's a sign they really did value you, right? Throughout life. Yep. All right. Anything else?
Throw a scenario at you,
Yeah.
okay? This has happened in the past, but you're my pastor, I'm dead. I
Yeah.
don't want the service. I want to be put in the grave within 24 hours.
Okay.
I've seen you, you've seen me.
Right.
I'm angry. And I wanted absolutely nothing. Stick me in the ground 24 hours after I'm dead.
Wait, did you say you were angry?
I died angry.
Oh, okay.
I died angry and disappointed in everything and the family. I don't want my family here. I don't want my son here.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah. That's why I had to have you repeat that. Like, again, if it's just a matter of you just want to get it done and over with quick, I wouldn't have much trouble with that. And again, like, sometimes, right, most graveside services are very short,
There
right?
wasn't one.
There wasn't one at all. Yeah.
It still bothers me that that's the way she did it.
Yeah.
She wanted the nurse to call my mother and tell her that she died, but somebody else notified her son in
Yeah.
Atlanta, but she didn't want him to come back.
Yeah.
And she had other family around. She's divorced.
Yeah.
She died angry.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think when there are bad situations like that, we don't want to make them less bad, right? We don't want to, again, I think everyone could say, regardless of your other views, that's not ideal, right? Not necessarily because of the practice, but because of the lingering hurt and all of that kind of stuff going on, right? And so again, I guess in one sense, I think with situations like that, that's where we have to take that to heart and go home and go, yeah, I probably should call my brother-in-law Tim, all right? We're still kind of feuding and, we're getting up there a little bit, or maybe we're even not, right? But, again, I think when anytime we see the ugliness of something, that's why I kind of don't like it at times when we have like really bad stuff in the world and everybody tries to explain it away by, careful here, but even like just a passing reference to like mental illness, right? And just like, well, that person obviously wasn't right? And I think, no, it's good to admit this went way, it's evil, right? And again, that's not passing judgment on like everything in the whole person's life, but we do good as Christians when we see an evil thing to call it that, right? And to see all this pent up, unresolved, unreconciled stuff, right? We need to be ones that again, first take that to heart and say, okay, maybe I need to do some thinking here, right? Or again, at times it might be with a loved one we know to say, hey, this has gone on long enough. Why don't you and Jim sit down sometime and actually talk, right? Try to figure this out, because Because there's certainly, I mean, again, there are deathbeds that are the most beautiful things in the world, right? Families there, everybody's at peace. I mean, my favorite is when you get these families that just, they're not putting on, they've always loved singing together, right? And they're sitting there reading scripture to each other, singing, right? I mean, it's the most beautiful stuff you can see on earth, right? But then there are those other times where, you know, even if it's not said, you're like, why isn't this person here? Right? Or, you know, what's going on here? And sometimes, again, we don't need to, anything that's, I mean, it's one of the things we're told as Christians is not to call evil good, right? And so again, it's not that we have to just pile on, but I think in a situation like that, we're right to just say, man, this isn't how that should go down, right? Yeah.
There was a young man that killed himself here a few years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you've seen his grave, but it looks, they got a park bench there.
Okay.
And I mean, it's a little overboard, I think.
Yeah.
Why, I mean, it's the same, I remember growing up, and once a year, we went to the cemetery and put the person on the grave.
Right.
It seems like, well, that's the only time you thought of that person? I hope not.
Yeah.
But it just, it's just.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could talk about this real quick, just like, because I do think there's a growing trend, right, where cemeteries are not visited, right, even on kind of those days you used to. So I don't know, how do you guys think about that? Because I think, again, Doug's kind of presenting the one side, right, where he kind of thinks it's weird, right, to go out there. But again, other people certainly just go out to honor that person, and sometimes it's just kind of helpful to their overall grieving process, right, to kind of have a place to locate, right? And I think particularly, and again, some of you have obviously been through this, but I think particularly, right, when it's a young person, there's so much grief that you're just, anything you can do to honor that person at the time, right? You kind of just do, and again, you know, maybe it even, you know, again, ends up looking overboard, or maybe it even, quote unquote, is overboard. But I think, you know, when those shocking times come, it's just sort of like, people just want to do whatever they can in that moment to sort of honor that person, give them a lasting legacy because they didn't, right, have one in terms of length of years or things like that.
Sometimes that's what helps the family to cope, is by doing those kinds of things, and maybe going and visiting the grave site a lot. That's how they cope with all of it.
Yeah, and I don't have anything wrong, you know, if that's comfortable for you, by all means do it. Right. Don't let it control your life.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. And again, like, I mean, I think like anything, right, it can become either way, right? It can be something that's kind of so constant that it can be not helping the grieving process, right? And in other cases, right, it can be the opposite way, that there's almost no recognition again after death that the person has died, and that can kind of stunt the grieving process, right? It's kind of going on inside. So, yeah, I don't know, because I do, you know, think about that a little bit. Again, have we lost some of that stuff? And again, there is something too, again, about just being in a cemetery, right? Probably not like late at night, you know, don't, right? That'll probably get you arrested too. But there is something about those places there. And again, like, you know, when we go back to thinking about most of the older churches with the graveyard right next to the church, right? And again, I remember, and I don't remember, Jamie, exactly what you said, but I remember a lot of people when we moved out to Ellsworth, you know, we were out at the country church with the graveside, you know, maybe 30 feet from the church, and probably, you know, I don't know, 250 feet from our house, right? And I remember people at least asking Jamie, like, does that bother you, right? That there's this, you know, your backyard is, or well, no, it's kind of side yard, right, is a cemetery. I don't think it bothered you really, but I do remember people asking that, right? And again, it's sort of one of those things, sometimes if you'll go and spend some time there, then you do learn, right? A lot of things, and you do think about things. But again, I don't think we have to say you have to be there, right, either, but yeah.
It was a good way, like, we would go walking, I don't know why, but we would just go walking through because they had really cool headstones, and there was this one Canadian one, and we just, we would see people's names from the church, like the last names, because they were all related, and then you went and asked them, so, that's another way to get to know people. You just ask them about their history and what happened to this person, because there was a lot of babies in that cemetery, so you just ask them, and it was a good way to get to know the people too.
Yeah, I mean, if you like history too, of course, those of you that do, you probably are more interested in cemeteries, right? Because you go through and you look, whoa, right? A lot of little ones here in a span of 10 years, or, right? And you can kind of look back and, yeah, there was something, right? A disease going through or whatever. Yeah. All right, anything else?
Walking through the cemetery with Mother several years ago, I said, Mother, John's not dead. She said, oh, Grandma just named him over again.
Just what? Say that again?
Name over again.
Oh.
There's two that are there, but there's two that are still alive.
Oh, yeah.
There's only 17 kids, so I don't know, maybe she couldn't think of that.
See, we haven't got to that point yet. I don't know. It's been a long time since we used Gideon. How about that?
It was also a good way, like, I remember, when I was pregnant, we'd go through the cemetery and be like, hey, what about that day? Like,
Trying to come up with unique names.
I think of family members that spend a long period of time in a nursing home and nobody comes to visit them.
Well, yeah,
But then
that's certainly problematic.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah,
I guess that's the way I look at it. It's just,
yeah. No, and that's certainly problematic. And, somewhere along this long path we've traveled here, I think we talked about that, right? Just this idea of that we got to be, that's why I put the before, during, and after, right? Is how we're caring for people at the end of their life too, right? Has definitely, I guess if I had to choose the two, are you going to your relatives before death or after death? If I had to just choose, I'd say before, right? But I think you can, right, certainly do both. And I think most people that go to the cemetery are doing that because they did spend, right, a lot of time with that person in life, and it's sort of a way to try to continue that in one sense, right? Even though
it brings comfort to the person.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, right.
It's when they get stuck in, one of those stages of grief where they're, or they're either in the denial, or they're angry, or,
Right.
That's when it can be.
Yeah, and that, I mean, again, that's where we go back to the mourning well as Christians, right? That it's good to grieve, but we also have to remember Christ's victory, right? And again, so yeah, if you have someone that is just completely ignoring the victory, the reunion coming, right? Then you want to stop and say, okay, let's talk about that for a second here. Yeah. All right, let's turn and read. I put here Jesus' death and burial. Jesus' death, burial, now I'm missing a comma there. And resurrection is our salvation, but also our example. And we've kind of hinted at this. I don't think we've talked about it directly, but I think we do good when we're kind of looking at this whole thing to just say, well, what happened with Jesus, and is there anything we can learn there? So we'll kind of end on this topic. So I think there's 3 screens. We're just going to read through the account from Mark here. So somebody would read screen 1.
I'm going to come sit up there and then I can read it.
All right. No glasses today?
Well, I can't read it with my readers and my contacts are being crazy. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." There were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. When he was in Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him, and there were also many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus.
All right. Somebody else want to read the next? Looks like the font's a little smaller. Sorry. This is like going to the eye doctor. Who can still read this one? The next one's in 3-point fonts. No, I'm just kidding.
Pilate was surprised to hear that he should have already died. And summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned that from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the corpse to Joseph. And Joseph brought a linen shroud, and taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud, and laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. He rolled the stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid.
All right. And then the final. Take us to Easter.
When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him."
All right. So, I mean, again, just kind of walking through, but I think you see, a lot of the things that we've talked about. I mean, the first one is just, right, he uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And again, I always think, right, I've been in a lot of hospital rooms. We kind of try not to have the loud cries. I mean, that's a whole different topic, right, of just trying to keep people comfortable. But I've been there too, where, right, there's pain at the end or something like that. But just that he breathed his last, right? A very simple statement of death. Again, a way most of us would talk about it if we were there, right? Yeah, then, Mom looked over this way and she breathed her last, right? Took that one final breath. So again, just Jesus' death here being a very natural, not in the sense of obviously his crucifixion causing it, but natural just in the sense at the end, he died as we all die. Stopped breathing, okay? We get some, right, miraculous stuff here of the curtain temple there that guarded the presence of God, right, being ripped open. No, I'll skip. There's some interesting things with that, but that's not our point today. So then, we get the statement of the centurion, but then we get this idea, right, of the people being gathered around as he died, right? And they were the ones that ministered to him throughout his life, right? It wasn't just that they were there at his death, they were there throughout life. And again, very common thing, right? The people that are usually there when you die, assuming there's time and opportunity, right? The people that are going to be in the room the last few days are probably the people that have been in the room with you everywhere, right? Unless, again, we may have some cases where there is some reconciliation that happens at the end, and if so, blessed be that for sure. And then, we get this interesting idea of Joseph of Arimathea, respected member of the council that essentially orchestrated, right, Jesus' death on the whole, right? Obviously there were dissenters, I guess we would say, but he comes probably at some measure of risk to himself, right? Again, I have to think about this from the perspective of him being crucified, everyone thinks he's a criminal, right? Or at least certain people. And again, so if you go afterwards and ask for a criminal's body, maybe you may be implicating yourself somewhat, right? But he took courage and he went and asked for the body. He's going to care for the body. And sure enough, right, well, Pilate first, he wants to make sure about the reality of death because he knows, based on everything that's happened, that's got to kind of be the end here. But then he does, right, give the body to Joseph. And, there's something here that even in our case today, if you have the most awful person and, let's say they're even, so awful that they end up being given the death penalty, right? The body's still going to be released to the family if someone, right, will step forward. And why? Again, well, because there is this idea of still the body should be cared for. So he buys a linen shroud, which is probably a little nicer than maybe even than what most people would be buried in, but maybe not, maybe similar. And the simplicity here, wraps him in the shroud and lays him in the tomb. They've been cut out of the rock. Of course, we're told other places this is his tomb. We're also told he was put there because the Sabbath is coming, and so they can't go further. And then we get again, right, these people that are watching this process. You almost think of this as like the committal.